I was 10 years old when she told us the world was nothing but chaos, and that my brother and I had to learn to be controlled. She didn't raise her voice. Her tone was steady, calm, almost gentle. She stood there, holding this old weather station like it was some sacred relic, and said, "Today is a day of discipline." Everyone thought she was our savior. She was our aunt. But to us, she became everything, our doctor, our judge, our God, and the one who decided what punishment looked like inside that house. I used to count the scratches on the basement pipes because I didn't have the words to say anything else. And when I finally got out, when she no longer controlled the forecast, I realized something important. I wasn't the one who was broken. Her world was. So let me tell you how it started. And why, for years, we were too scared to even breathe. You ever realize your life ended on a day you didn't die? I was 10 that morning. It was one of those rare Saturdays when everything just felt good, like life had finally decided to be kind for once. Mom had the day off. Dad was making pancakes. We were heading to a park just outside of Salem. I can still see that car ride clear as day. Noah half asleep with his juice box. Mom singing along to that awful pop song she secretly loved. And Dad stealing glances at her at every red light like he still couldn't believe she was real. Then everything shattered. I don't remember the crash itself. Just flashes. A sharp turn. Tires screaming. Mom yelling no, no, no. Like she could stop time. A truck horn. Then nothing. And after that nothing came the silence. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. My head throbbed. My body felt borrowed. Like it didn't belong to me. And sitting beside me was a woman I barely remembered. My aunt, Caroline. She looked calm. Too calm. Her hand was on mine, her voice low and careful, like she'd been there all along. "Thank God," she whispered. "You're okay." I was so worried. My brain was foggy, but I managed to croak out, "Where's Mom?" Her face didn't change. Her voice didn't waver. "They didn't make it, sweetheart. But I'm here now. You're safe with me." I screamed, I know I did. Nurses rushed in, someone gave me something, and the world faded to black. By the time I woke up again, the story had already been written. Caroline was listed as our emergency contact. She had all the papers, family photos, birth certificates, everything. Said she'd been nearby when she heard about the crash over a police scanner. Said she got there first. That she called 911. That she pulled Noah from the wreck with her bare hands. Everyone called her a hero. I didn't question it. My mind was fractured, spinning. I could barely sit up without throwing up. And Noah. He hadn't spoken since it happened. Not one word. He didn't even cry. Just sat curled up on the hospital bed, clutching a blanket against his face, humming the same broken tune over and over, like a machine stuck in a loop. Less than a week later, we moved into Caroline's house. It looked perfect, like something straight from a home magazine. Every curtain steamed, every book alphabetized, every floor spotless. But that first night, I knew something was off. Not anything obvious, just a feeling. Too quiet, too clean, too staged. And then came the rules. No touching the thermostat. No opening drawers without permission. No sound after 8. You asked before leaving a room. You asked before taking food. And if the doorbell rang, you stood still and silent. She said it all with a smile. "We keep order in this house," she'd tell us sweetly. "Order keeps us safe." At first, social workers came every week. Always on schedule. Always announced ahead of time. She'd bake cookies, make us dress up, and tell them we were still adjusting. Noah's silence became part of her story. The poor traumatized boy too broken to speak. And me? I was the brave one. I said what I thought they wanted to hear. Maybe because I didn't know better. Or maybe because deep down I already did. Because between those visits we weren't safe. Not even close. The first time I realized she wasn't just strict, I was 11. I'd spilled juice on her living room carpet. Barely a drop. I panicked, grabbed paper towels, tried to clean it fast. She saw me from the kitchen. She didn't yell, didn't curse. Just walked over, holding a cloth in one hand and an old metal gadget in the other. It looked like some antique barometer. She turned the dial slowly. "Rain's coming," she said. Then she grabbed my arm and hauled me into the bathroom. She locked the door, made me strip to my underwear and stand in the tub while she turned the cold water on full blast. I screamed before I even understood what was happening. My skin went numb. My chest burned. "This is correction," she said through the shower curtain. "This method works. You'll see." I stood there shivering for what felt like forever. When she finally let me out, she handed me a towel and said, "Clean boys don't stain carpets." That night I didn't sleep. Noah had heard everything. I could tell. He didn't talk, but he crawled into my bed and clung to my arm, trembling. That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry again. Not in front of her. I was going to survive. It only got worse from there, slowly but with precision. Every mistake came with punishment. Speak too loud at dinner? Face the wall for half an hour. Take an extra slice of bread? Skip the next meal. Argue? The basement. And always the weather station. She treated it like it was holy. "This isn't me deciding," she'd say in that calm, sacred tone. "This is the weather. The weather tells us what's needed. I'm just the vessel." At first I thought it was some twisted joke. But it wasn't. She truly believed it, that our behavior controlled the weather. That punishment brought purity. That silence meant order. And Noah, he suffered most. He'd lose it when lights flickered, when the vacuum turned on, when anything broke his routine. She called that defiance. She made him write journals every single day. He had to sit at the kitchen table and write what he'd done wrong. If he couldn't come up with something, she'd help him. "You took too long to answer. You breathed too loud during dinner. You blinked when I was speaking." He filled notebook after notebook with her accusations. I hid them in the vent behind my bedroom wall. I didn't know why, but I knew they mattered. By 14, I had a part-time job at a cafe. She liked that, said it built character, told the neighbors how proud she was. But really, I had my own plan. I was saving every cent, every tip. Because one day we were getting out. People always ask why we didn't tell someone, a teacher, a cop, maybe my boss at the cafe. The truth? We were terrified. Not just of her punishments, but of what would happen if we spoke out. Caroline didn't rule with fear alone. She ruled with control. She knew how to twist the truth until even we started doubting our own reality. She had the paperwork. She had the story. And whenever I even looked like I might be thinking too much, she'd lean close and whisper, "Do you know what happens to children who lie about their guardians?" Her tone was soft, almost sweet. "They get separated, locked up, sent to group homes, places where nobody knows them, nobody loves them." When I was 12, I asked her once, what would happen if someone found out about her punishments? She didn't even blink. "They'd take you both," she said. "You'd be sent to different homes. Noah wouldn't be with you anymore." Then she leaned in, her breath cold and sour. "And sweetheart, you know how he gets when he's alone." I froze, because she was right about one thing: Noah didn't handle being alone. That night, a leaky faucet sent him spiraling. He screamed until he vomited, rocking, covering his ears like the world was collapsing. I tried to hold him, tried to calm him down. Caroline just stood in the doorway, watching. "See," she said quietly, "this is why I do what I do. I keep you safe." The world wouldn't understand him. From then on, I knew exactly what she meant. If I ever opened my mouth, she'd make sure we were torn apart. Her worst punishment was the basement. She called it detox. No light, no windows, just a filthy mattress and a rusted bucket in the corner. Sometimes she'd leave me there for hours. Once for 2 whole days. Noah too, but he never lasted long before passing out from sheer panic. She said it was necessary, that the world was poisoned with disobedience and noise, and detox cleansed us of it. And the worst part? She believed it. Not as a metaphor. She had binders full of research, old photocopied studies long discredited. She'd show them off like sacred texts and call it her method. To everyone else, she was the kind woman who took in her orphan nephews. To us, she was the weather, unpredictable, shifting, dangerous. But I never stopped paying attention, never stopped remembering, because as I got older, things started to come back. Small flashes from the day of the crash. Her claim that she got to the scene first. But I remembered her face before the ambulance arrived. Standing at the side of the road. Not crying. Just watching. I remembered Mom screaming. I remembered being pulled, but not from the car. From the ground. And I remembered blood on Caroline's coat. It didn't all make sense yet, but those fragments were enough to burn through the fear. That was the first spark. The moment I stopped just surviving and started fighting back. That's when I began making copies. I took photos of Noah's journals, of her method binders, of anything that looked important. At 14, I already worked part-time at a cafe, so I used the printer in the back office. My manager thought I was printing schoolwork. Every file went into the vent behind my bed. Labeled, organized, hidden. I didn't know what I was building then. Maybe evidence. Maybe hope. Then one day everything shifted. Caroline said she had a therapy appointment across town and wouldn't be back until late. She grabbed her expensive purse, locked the front door, and left like it was any other day. I waited. 5 minutes. Then 10. The silence in the house was heavier than ever. And finally I moved. Her office had always been off limits. Contaminate the method, she used to say whenever I even looked at that door. But weeks earlier, I'd pocketed a tiny flathead screwdriver from the cafe. Every night, I practiced on my desk drawer, listening for that soft click of surrender. That afternoon, I put it to work. The lock gave way faster than I expected. I thought I'd hear a loud crack, maybe the groan of old hinges giving in. But no, just 3 careful turns, and the door swung open like it had been waiting for me all along. The smell hit first. Not dust or decay. Something sharper. Paper. Ink. That sterile scent from places where people study things they probably shouldn't. Her desk was spotless. 2 pencils lined up with surgical precision. Perfect stack of untouched notepads. But it was the filing cabinet that caught me. Black, metal, and ice cold to the touch. The top drawer was locked. The second wasn't. Inside were folders, thick, worn, and labeled like something out of a research lab. Cycle 1. Compliance records. Adjustment logs. But one folder stopped me cold. Project behavior. Phase A. Subject/Subject B. My hands were shaking when I opened it. The first page looked like an intake report. No names, just data. Subject A, male, 10, high-functioning, verbal. Subject B, male, 5, nonverbal tendencies, sensory-reactive. The birth dates matched ours. The trauma summary mentioned vehicular parental loss and custodial placement. It was us. But this wasn't an official document. It wasn't foster paperwork. It was her own private system. The next pages were titled Daily Behavior Logs, written in her careful, perfect cursive. Day 4. Subject B screamed for 27 minutes. Method ineffective. Adjust punishment scale. Day 7. Subject A remains defiant but responsive. Initiate wall standing protocol. Day 9. Subject B shows signs of internalization. Reduce vocal exposure. Begin journal therapy. Page after page of cold, mechanical notes. No emotion. No hesitation. She documented everything. She didn't see us as family. She didn't even see us as children. We were data points. Experiments. The folder went on charts tracking our reactions to punishment, graphs showing compliance windows, timelines for reward cycles, and setback assessments. One page made my stomach turn. Target silence level, plotted against food portions. As if hunger was just another dial she could twist to control us. It wasn't random cruelty. It was designed. Then I found the worst page of all. A progress summary, dated 6 months after the accident. Subject A demonstrates sustained resistance. However, influence on Subject B is diminishing. Recommend temporary separation if long-term reprogramming fails. Alternate guardianship options should be investigated only in emergency. No names, but I didn't need them. I knew what it meant. If I kept fighting back, she planned to separate us. I dug deeper. In a folder marked Incident Notes, I found a single photograph. Noah, sitting on the kitchen floor, nose bleeding, one of his journals in his lap, and in the background, a kitchen timer on the table counting down. The caption read, "Punishment delay, B test of non-reactivity." I dropped the file. Something in me snapped right then, a wire stretched too far for too long. This wasn't discipline. It wasn't structure. It was designed cruelty dressed up in scientific language so she could call herself a researcher instead of what she really was. A sadist. But I didn't cry. Couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my backpack and started shoving everything inside, the files, the photograph, the pages of notes. Then I pulled out the flash drive Adrian had given me. The one he said could spread, not delete. Adrian was the older barista at the cafe, 19, smart in the quiet kind of way. He hated authority. Once, after I told him I didn't have internet at home, he handed me that drive and said, "If you ever need to make something seen, plug it in. The truth finds its way out." So I did. The light blinked red, then blue. It started uploading. I had no idea where it was sending the data, and I didn't care. I just sat there, perfectly still, listening to the soft clicks of each folder opening, each file transferring. Then I did something I hadn't planned. I printed a full copy of the project behavior file, folded the pages, slid them into an envelope, and tucked it into my coat. If the flash drive failed, if the files in the vent were destroyed, at least one version of the truth would survive me. I relocked the cabinet, straightened the desk, and erased every trace of what I'd done. And just as I finished, I heard it. Tires crunching on the gravel driveway. Her car. My stomach dropped. I ran to my room, stuffed the papers into the vent, taped the envelope behind the wall panel, and sat on my bed, trying to breathe like nothing had happened. My heart was pounding so loud I thought it might give me away. Then the door opened. Caroline stepped inside and said, "We need to have a talk." I didn't flinch. I just nodded, because I wasn't her scared little project anymore. I was a witness, and now I had proof. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She just stood there in the doorway, perfectly still. Her beige sweater draped neatly across her shoulders like a uniform she'd worn her whole life. The only thing out of place was her mouth. Lips pressed so tightly together that the skin around them turned white. "We need to reset the house," she said. That was code. It meant you're slipping. You're resisting. I'm taking control again. I pretended not to understand. Nodded like I was calm. "Okay," I said softly, but inside, every nerve in my body was screaming. She turned and walked away without another word. I heard her open Noah's door, her voice low and steady. "Come with me, sweetheart. Let's do some breathing." I wanted to rush in, to stop her, but I knew better, so I waited. 30 minutes passed. The house fell quiet, and then I heard it. Click. The sound I'd grown up dreading. The smart lock on my door sliding into place from the outside. I ran to the handle, twisted it. Nothing. The window, bolted shut, always had been. She called it fall prevention. I called it what it really was, prison. My heartbeat drowned out everything else. I stepped back, trying to think. Then her voice came through the intercom. Flat, calm, almost mechanical. "The cleansing phase begins now," she said. "Patient A, high resistance. Patient B, regressive. Objective, silence. First priority, isolation." It didn't even sound human anymore. Then I heard another sound. The faint mechanical whir of the hallway camera turning, like a blinking eye. I looked up at the vent, the one place she hadn't touched. Yet, I moved fast, pulled the panel open, grabbed the flash drive, the backups, the printouts, everything. The envelope went into my coat lining, the flash drive into my sock. Then my eyes fell on the baseboard vent near the floor, the only opening wide enough for Noah. We'd made a plan months ago. If things went bad, if I got caught, if he had to run without me, he'd crawl through the basement and escape through the old garden grate we'd found loose years back. But first, I needed to reach him. I waited until the house went still again, then grabbed the broken metal leg from my desk chair, the one I'd saved for reasons I never quite knew. I wedged it under the doorknob and pulled with everything I had. 2 minutes, maybe 3, then crack. The frame splintered, the lock housing bent, and the door gave way. I bolted. Noah's door was locked too, but I could hear him, not crying, not screaming, just rocking back and forth, that soft, rhythmic motion he did when he was trying to disappear inside his own head. I pressed my lips to the crack in the door. "It's me," I whispered. No answer. "Remember what we talked about, no?" I said quietly. "The vent, the garden grate. It's time." A pause. Then the sound of him getting up, the soft creak of the mattress, a shuffle of feet. Then silence again. Good. He was moving. I turned toward the stairs. If I could distract her long enough, he'd have time to slip out. We'd rehearsed it. Every quiet step, every turn, no lights. It was a game to him once, a lifeline to me. I crept toward the living room, and there she was, sitting in her armchair, laptop open, eyes on the live camera feeds, including the one in the basement. "I knew you'd try," she said without even looking at me. "You always were the clever one." I froze. She smiled faintly. "You're smarter than the others. That's why you'll stay. That's why this time we'll get it right." Then she picked up a small remote and started pressing buttons. Click. The front door locked. Click. The back. Click. The basement. Every exit sealed in seconds. I turned to run, but the door behind me slammed shut and locked automatically. She stood up slowly, deliberately, her laptop still glowing behind her. "You thought you could beat me," she said softly. "After everything I've done for you?" She stepped closer and grabbed my face, her nails digging into my skin. "Now we start over," she hissed. "No more games. No more pretending you're still a child. No more hope." And for 3 days she meant it. No lights, no sleep, no real food, just that gray sludge she called reset formula. The smart lights flickered all night, the cameras tracking every move. Each time I shut my eyes, her voice came through the speakers. "Confess what you did wrong today." Every day, I told her the same thing. Nothing. Every day she made me stand, sit, kneel, repeat, timed, monitored. Noah was gone. I didn't know where. Maybe he'd made it out. Maybe he hadn't. She wouldn't tell me, just whispered through the intercom. "He left you. That's what they do. They always leave you." She thought she'd broken me. But what she didn't know was that I'd already won. The flash drive had done its job. The photos, the logs, the project behavior files, they were all out. The envelope was sent. The clock was already ticking. She just didn't know it yet. The 4th morning came with silence. No voice through the speakers. No artificial lights burning my eyes. Just quiet. Real, natural quiet. I lay there on the cold floor, staring up at the ceiling. My wrists ached. My stomach twisted from days of nothing but water and that gray paste she called food. For a second, just one, I thought maybe I was dead. Then I heard tires. Not her Prius, the soft electric hum I'd grown to dread, but something heavier. Big tires. Boots on gravel. Voices. I sat up fast. Footsteps, urgent, direct, muffled shouting, then pounding on the door. "Police! Open up!" I froze. It worked. It actually worked. The lock clicked from the outside, and for the first time in years, that sound meant freedom. When the door opened, it wasn't her standing there. It was a cop, early 30s, wearing a Kevlar vest. His eyes went wide as he scanned the room. The stripped mattress, the cameras, the marks on my wrists. His jaw clenched. Jesus Christ. 2 more officers came in behind him. They didn't ask anything at first. They just guided me out, down the hall, through the kitchen, and finally through the front door. It was open. Wide open. For the first time in forever. Outside, the yard was swarming. Patrol cars. Plainclothes detectives. Even a couple of reporters already shouting questions from behind the fence. And next to one of the SUVs, wrapped in a silver thermal blanket, was Noah. He saw me, and for the first time since the accident, he ran. On his own. Straight into my arms. Everything after that came in flashes. Questions. Flashbulbs. Clipboards. A medic checking my vitals. Someone photographing my wrists. A woman asking if I needed a translator. I guess I looked that far gone. But I kept asking the same thing over and over. Did someone get the envelope? Took a while before anyone answered. Then a detective, a tired-looking guy with a thick mustache, knelt beside me. "You sent this?" he asked, holding up a manila envelope with my handwriting on it. I nodded. He looked me dead in the eyes. "Son," he said quietly, "you just cracked open something a lot bigger than you realize." Caroline didn't go quietly. She showed up in the middle of it all, parking halfway down the street, probably realizing something was wrong when she saw the flashing lights. But she didn't run. She walked up the driveway like she still owned the place. Calm, composed, like she was arriving at a dinner party instead of a crime scene. When an officer stepped forward to stop her, she smiled. "This is a misunderstanding," she said. "I'm their legal guardian." No one responded. They just showed her the photos, then the warrant, then the files, the ones I'd copied. She didn't cry, didn't scream, just tilted her head slightly, like she was analyzing data. "He's always been unstable," she said softly, nodding toward me. "The younger one too. That's why the method was necessary." And that's when the detective lost it. He pulled a recorder from his pocket, slammed it onto the hood of a cruiser, and hit play. Her voice filled the air, calm, precise, cold. Subject A resists starvation. Subject B dissociates after light deprivation. Adjust methods accordingly. Her face twitched barely, but enough. That was the moment she knew she'd lost. The story exploded the next day. Not just local, national. Portland woman arrested after files reveal systematic abuse masquerading as behavioral therapy. They called it the Weather House case because of that old weather station she used before every punishment. The footage from her cameras hit the internet within hours. Not all of it, but enough. Clips of Noah trembling in a corner. Me locked in a stripped room. Pages from her project behavior logs. The public went insane. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone wanted to know how no one had noticed. Then came the survivors. Kids who'd lived in Caroline's house before us, legally or not. Former neighbors. A nurse who'd once suspected something but never had proof. A caseworker who'd said she always seemed too perfect. And then came the parents. Some arrived with photos. Some with old documents. Some just with heartbreak in their eyes. It turned out that among the files I'd copied were the names of other children, kids who'd vanished over the years. Some names matched those in social service archives. But Caroline had erased them, renamed them, forged paperwork, altered medical records. One file in particular stood out. Case Aiden K. / deceased, internal flag only. It was about a boy named Aiden Kesley, supposedly transferred to a rehabilitation program after behavioral issues. But his family had been searching for him for 3 years. When a journalist mentioned his name on a podcast, everything changed. The next day, a couple from Idaho showed up at the newsroom. They brought a photo. Aiden at 7 years old, light hair, sad eyes. Their story was like so many others. Social services took their son for discipline concerns, placed him in a new care program, and then nothing. No updates, no trace. Now they knew what happened. In Caroline's files, his name was listed as Patient D. Shows aggression. Isolate. They broke down crying on camera, clutching a printout of the document I'd found. Noah was placed in a real trauma center, a place that actually helped people. He got a real diagnosis, real treatment. No correction journals, no cold showers, just therapy, soft voices, and cats. He smiled again, slowly, carefully, like sunlight cracking through ice. As for me, I became a witness, protected, interviewed, documented. A few news networks offered to buy our story. I said no, not yet. I wasn't ready to let someone else tell it for me. But when I finally was ready, I gave one interview. Just one. I sat down in front of the camera and held up the weather station they'd pulled from her house. The same one she used like a sacred artifact, the one she said could predict punishment. I looked straight into the lens and said one line, "The forecast has changed." The first night in the shelter, I slept with a chair wedged under the door handle. They gave me a small room, plain, clean, with a soft bed and white walls. A single poster hung above the desk, a mountain lake reflecting a pale sky. It looked peaceful. It was safe, but I still couldn't breathe. Every sound in the hallway made my body seize up. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant footstep, sent a jolt of panic through me. Like my nerves didn't understand that the danger was gone. Someone knocked once, softly. I didn't answer. I just sat there in the dark, my back against the wall, arms wrapped around my knees. Freedom didn't feel the way I'd imagined. They assigned me a caseworker the next morning. Her name was Laura Castillo, mid-30s, straight dark hair, and a voice that somehow managed to sound both kind and grounded. She told me she'd worked with dozens of kids who came from places like mine, but she never said she understood. And that's exactly why I trusted her. I saw Noah 2 days later. They'd brought him into the same building, just a different floor. I wasn't allowed to visit right away. The doctors said he needed time, space, stability. But I waited anyway, sat by the elevator every morning just in case. Then, on the third day, the door opened. He stood there in clothes too big for him, holding a stuffed animal someone had given him. A little gray bear with one eye missing. We just stared at each other for a moment. Then he reached out, not to cling, not to hide, just to touch my hand, like he was checking if I was real. We sat there on the hallway floor like that for almost an hour. No words, no tears, just existing side by side, together. That's when the memories started coming back. Not the ones from the basement or the punishments, earlier ones. Before all that, Mom's voice humming while she cooked dinner. Dad's bad jokes about Noah's love for spinning toys. The day of the accident. Tires screeching. Glass breaking. Mom's scream. And then Caroline's face. I told Laura about it the next time we met. She didn't grab her pen or start typing right away. She just listened. "Do you think it was real?" she asked gently. "I don't know," I said. "I want to believe it was just a dream." But she waited. But I remember the smell. Gasoline. And her perfume. Cinnamon. That made her pause. She didn't say anything for a long time, but I could tell something clicked behind her eyes. Finally, she sighed. "I'm not supposed to show you this," she said quietly, "but I think you deserve to know." She handed me a folder. I flipped through the pages. Accident reports, photos, statements. 2 cars. A head-on collision. One driver killed instantly. The other vehicle, my parents' car, hit the guardrail and flipped. And then, near the bottom of the report, one line I'd never seen before. Caller. Female bystander. Response time. 90 seconds after impact. Approximate age. 40s. Status. Left the scene before officers arrived. I stared at the page until the words blurred. I didn't have to ask. We both knew who it was. Laura brought me another stack of documents. This time, they weren't about the crash. They were about Caroline. "Are you ready?" she asked quietly. "Because this is a little different. After everything, the confinement, the court hearings, the endless interviews, and the hollow days that followed, only one thing lingered. Questions. Why her? Why us? And most of all, how could something like this happen? I went back through the files I'd taken from her office. Not to revisit the punishments or behavior logs. I already knew those by heart. I was looking for names. And eventually I found one. A single signature at the bottom of a letter about permission to change guardianship status. Approved. R. Kessler/DCS internal. Confidential. I showed it to Laura and asked what DCS meant. She didn't even pause. Department of Child Services, she said. Then her expression hardened. If that signature's real, she added, this is very bad. Kessler's been with the department for over a decade. He's the current head of the Portland office. I couldn't just sit there after that. I reached out to Mara, a journalist I'd met during the investigation. She had contacts. A few days later, She came back with news that made my stomach drop. Kessler had approved dozens of guardianship transfers that skipped every required background check. Most of the kids were labeled unadaptable. My name was on that list. So was Noah's. And 8 more belonging to children who didn't exist in any school, hospital, or social service registry. Why would he do that? I asked. Mara shrugged. Money, maybe, or loyalty, or maybe he really believed in her methods. That last thought chilled me to the bone. What if he didn't see it as abuse? What if, in his mind, it was treatment, some twisted form of prevention for kids like us? Then came the part that made my blood run cold. One of the files Caroline had synced to the cloud before the upload contained an attachment. A traffic camera still. The image was grainy, but clear enough to see a gray van parked along the highway shoulder just minutes before the crash. Attached was a temporary driver's license issued to Caroline Mercer, dated 3 days before the accident. Caroline doesn't drive, my mom had said once. I'm afraid of roads, she'd told the hospital staff when she picked us up after the crash. But there it was. Proof she had a license. Proof she was there. Before the paramedics. I watched that clip again and again, frame by frame until the pieces started to fit. She knew our route. She had the vehicle. She was the first person on scene. And she was the one who filed the guardianship paperwork before I'd even woken up in the hospital. I took everything to Laura, spread the photos and documents across her desk. This wasn't random, I said. It wasn't just cruelty. She planned it from the beginning. Laura pressed her lips together. We'll open an official investigation, she said carefully. But you need to understand, if she had protection, they'll try to bury this. Fast. I nodded. I'm not scared of her anymore, I said quietly. Now I want her to be scared of me. Laura hesitated, then handed me a folder filled with more evidence. After your files hit the police and the press, people started digging. Look at this. The first section was payments. For over 6 years, Caroline had been collecting state funds as a foster guardian. Not just for me and Noah, but for 10 children. Fake names. Forged papers. But the bank records were real. She'd been receiving monthly checks from a state foster care support program. In some cases, double payments for 2 children unable to coexist due to behavioral issues. Except, those children didn't exist. No school records. No doctor visits. Nothing. Then came the connections. Caroline had been working as a child behavior consultant for 3 private clinics. She wrote risk assessments, adaptation plans, and disciplinary protocols for teenagers labeled difficult. One letter stood out. Caroline Mercer has demonstrated exceptional skill in corrective behavioral work. We recommend her as a specialist in cases involving aggression, autism, and attachment disorders. Hillpine Institute Psychiatric Clinic. Hillpine, a name already whispered about in survivor forums, known for patient rights violations but never proven. She'd been there for 4 years. And then came the testimonies. After the story broke, people started coming forward, former foster kids from other states. One of them, a young man named Brandon, called into the same podcast that had first aired my story, Weather of Punishment. His voice shook as he spoke. I remember her. She made me sleep in the bathroom because she said I was cold. She taped my mouth shut when I cried. I was with her 2 weeks. Then she passed me on. But after that, I never talked the same again. He's 23 now. I didn't know what to say when I heard it. It wasn't just about me and Noah anymore. Not about one house, one woman, one nightmare. It was bigger. A system that had built people like her. And protected them, paid them, even praised them. That night, I opened my notebook again. On the first clean page I wrote, she was part of a network. I don't know how many of us there are, but I'm not alone anymore. Laura's voice was calm but tight, like she was holding something back. There's a man, she said. I'm not sure he'll want to talk, but he used to work at Ridgepoint. I blinked. Ridgepoint? What's that? A school? A shelter? She shook her head. A psychiatric center. Private. Out near Salem. It used to be one of those closed facilities the kind that took in difficult kids the system didn't want to handle. And he was a night watchman there. Quit after something happened in 2012. I reached out to him, told him who you were, one of Caroline's kids. He said he'd meet you. His name was Mark Delaney. He looked about 60, built solid, voice like gravel. But when he saw me, his eyes welled up. We met in a small cafe in Gresham. Laura came too, though she didn't say a word, just sat nearby, watching. I worked at Ridgepoint from 2007 to 2012, he started. I wasn't part of the medical team. I handled the night shifts, cleaned, changed beds, handed out meds. But I saw more than I should have. Did you know Caroline? I asked. He nodded slowly. She wasn't just a consultant. She wrote the methods for half the departments. Everyone listened to her. She said she could retrain any kid. Called it corrective architecture. My stomach twisted. She tested that system, Mark continued, on real kids, sometimes on ones who were about to be released back to regular schools. After her sessions, they never came back the same. He reached into his jacket and pulled out an old, yellowed folder. Inside was a single sheet, a training form for new hires. Across the top, it read, Ridgepoint Behavioral Transition Facility. Confidential Orientation Addendum. Compiled by M. Mercer, lead compliance consultant. Then came the rules. Silence hours must be enforced without exception. Resistance, classified as vocal manipulation, must be corrected through reflective isolation. Journals collected weekly for psychological mapping. A staff prohibited from discussing methods with families or third parties. And at the bottom, scrawled in red marker, any breach of internal silence protocol will result in immediate dismissal. Mark looked at me with steady eyes. One night, I left a window open. A boy, I think his name was Tyler, managed to slip a letter through the bars. A woman found it outside. That letter started an investigation. 2 years later, Ridgepoint shut down. And Caroline? I asked. He shook his head bitterly. She walked away clean, claimed her method had been used without authorization. He leaned forward. That's when I understood what she really was. Not just cruel, ideological. She believed in it. She built a whole system, and they let her keep using it. I sat there, frozen, because in that moment, everything clicked. I hadn't been raised. I'd been conditioned. Every habit, every fear, every reaction, it wasn't random. It was orchestrated, designed. I wasn't a child to her. I was data. That night, I didn't sleep. I just stared at my notebook and finally wrote. It wasn't Caroline. It was a factory, and I was their product. The trial dragged on for almost a year. In that time, I moved twice, changed therapists 3 times, and learned how to answer reporters' questions without clenching my fists. Caroline sat in a glass partition during every hearing, her hair tied in a bun, a gray suit, calm, collected, human almost. But every time I remembered the cold showers, Noah's sin diaries, or the hours I'd spent facing the wall, her expression stayed the same. Blank. No guilt. No regret. Just like in the videos, patient A is resisting. Begin isolation. I was the key witness. The prosecutors said that without the flash drive, without the hidden copies and letters I'd stashed in that vent, the case might never have made it to court. Others testified after me: Renee, a nurse from Ridgepoint, a social worker who'd lost his job after raising questions, and finally, the psychiatrist, Dr. Levin. Her evaluation became the defining moment. The patient exhibits paranoid schizophrenia with elements of religiously manipulative thinking. Her concept of reprogramming children reflects a deep, structured psychosis. Caroline's lawyer pled insanity, but the judge didn't buy it. Yes, Ms. Mercer is mentally ill, he said, but her organization, precision, and deliberate manipulation prove she knew exactly what she was doing. The verdict: 47 years in prison with the right to appeal after 35. Mandatory psychiatric treatment in a closed medical facility for inmates. A separate case: fraud and conspiracy with government officials, including R. Kessler, added another 15 years. No parole. When it was all over, reporters swarmed me, microphones flashing in my face. They asked what I wanted to say. I told them only this: she was the system, and we were statistics. Now we are witnesses, and we will not be silent anymore. Caroline's gone now, to a place where her rules, her schedules, her methods mean nothing. The court left behind headlines, photos of my face I barely recognized, and piles of letters asking for interviews, book deals, documentaries. I ignored them all. Noah lives in a small rehabilitation home near the forest. Quiet, peaceful, filled with animals. No shouting, no cameras. I visit every week. We don't talk much, but not because we're afraid anymore. Sometimes he sketches. Sometimes he just looks up at the sky and says, "There are no cameras there." And I say, "There aren't." Then he smiles small, real. And I know he's finding his way back. As for me, I live alone now. A modest apartment in a quiet neighborhood where no one asks questions. On my wall, a corkboard covered in names, dates, case notes, interviews. I'm still writing. Not as a victim anymore, but as someone who records the truth. My next article isn't about me. It's about the children the system called difficult. Because we were never difficult. We were children. One day I went back to that house. Not alone, this time with a journalist, a cameraman, and official clearance. The place was hollow. Walls peeling. Dust thick on the floor. But in the corner of the hallway, right where the surveillance shelf once stood, I saw it. The old weather station. I picked it up, held it, and said quietly, "You don't decide the weather here anymore." Then I set it down and smashed it. That night, I recorded one last video. Not for the news. Not for fame. For me. For Noah. For everyone who lived through it. We were silent. They broke us. They shaped us. But we remember. And we are alive. The end of that story. Or maybe the beginning of a new one. A free one.